Welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving deep into one of the most gripping and thought-provoking post-apocalyptic films ever made, The Book of Eli, released in 2010. This is a film that goes far beyond the typical end-of-the-world survival story. It is a movie about faith, purpose, protection, and the extraordinary power that a single book can hold over an entire civilization. If you have never seen this film, or if you watched it years ago and forgot how remarkable it truly is, then this breakdown is going to give you everything you need to understand why The Book of Eli remains one of the most uniquely crafted films of its decade. The Book of Eli is an American post-apocalyptic action thriller film. It was directed by the Hughes Brothers, that is Alan Hughes and Albert Hughes, who are twin brothers and acclaimed filmmakers known for their raw and intense storytelling style. The film was produced under the banner of Alcon Entertainment and distributed by Warner Brothers Pictures. It was written by Gary Whitta, who later went on to write Rogue One, a Star Wars story, which tells you a great deal about the caliber of writing talent behind this project. The film was shot primarily in the deserts of New Mexico, United States, and the stark, bleached landscape of that region becomes almost a character in itself throughout the movie. The cinematography was handled by Don Burgess, and the haunting, desaturated visual style of the film gives it a look that is immediately recognizable and deeply atmospheric. Plot details. The story is set approximately 30 years after an unspecified catastrophic war that has devastated the entire planet. The sky has been torn open, the sun burns with an intensity that blinds people who look at it directly, and civilization as we know it has completely collapsed. Water is scarce, food is limited, and most of humanity has descended into brutal tribal violence, cannibalism, and lawlessness. The world of the Book of Eli is not just destroyed, it is spiritually empty, morally bankrupt, and desperately searching for meaning. In the middle of all this devastation walks a lone man named Eli. He travels on foot, heading west across the ruins of America. He does not explain where he is going, and for much of the film, we do not fully understand why. What we do know is that Eli is carrying something incredibly precious, a book. Not just any book, but what appears to be the last remaining copy of the King James Bible on earth. Eli believes he has been given a divine mission to carry this book to a specific destination in the West, guided by an inner voice he describes as a calling from God. He has been walking for 30 years, surviving every danger the broken world has thrown at him, and he continues forward with an almost superhuman sense of purpose and calm. Eli is not helpless. Far from it. He is an extraordinarily skilled fighter, capable of taking on multiple armed attackers with a machete and later with firearms. His combat abilities are shown early in the film in a brutal and impressively choreographed fight sequence, and throughout the story it becomes clear that Eli has been protected in ways that go beyond ordinary human capability. He moves through the wasteland like a force of nature, killing only when necessary, living simply, and maintaining a rigid personal code of conduct. The central conflict of the film begins when Eli arrives in a small, fortified town that is ruled by a powerful and intelligent man named Carnegie. Carnegie is not a mindless tyrant. He is educated, articulate, and deeply strategic. He understands something that most survivors in this broken world do not, that true power does not come from guns or water alone. It comes from words. It comes from the ability to control what people believe and what they hope for. Carnegie has spent years searching for a Bible because he knows that the right words, delivered with the right authority, can make people follow a leader without question. He wants to use the Bible as a tool of control, as propaganda, as a means of building an empire over the desperate and the faithful. When Carnegie discovers that Eli is carrying a Bible, a confrontation becomes inevitable. Carnegie sends his men after Eli, and Eli refuses to surrender the book under any circumstances. He escapes the town with a young woman named Solara, who is the daughter of Carnegie's companion. Solara initially tries to steal the book on Carnegie's orders but gradually comes to respect and admire Eli. As they travel together, the relationship between Eli and Solara becomes one of the emotional cores of the film. He teaches her, protects her, and slowly reveals more about his mission and his faith. The journey westward takes them through increasingly dangerous territory. They encounter a seemingly friendly elderly couple living in an isolated house who turn out to be cannibals. They are captured and barely escape. Carnegie and his armed convoy pursue them relentlessly, and a brutal shootout takes place at the old couple's house in one of the film's most intense action sequences. Eli is shot during the confrontation but continues moving forward, driven entirely by his sense of mission. Eventually, Eli and Solara reach the coast of California and cross over to Alcatraz Island, which has been converted into a sanctuary for scholars, artists, and those trying to preserve human knowledge and culture. The leader of this community, a man named Lombardi, welcomes Eli and realizes immediately the significance of what he has brought. Eli, gravely wounded from the gunshot he sustained earlier, dictates the entire text of the King James Bible from memory, word for word, before passing away. It is revealed at this moment, in one of the film's most stunning and debated twists, that Eli has been blind for an unspecified period of time. He navigated the entire journey, fought every battle, and read the Bible, which turns out to be written in Braille, without the ability to see. His extraordinary survival and navigation abilities are left open to interpretation, with the film strongly implying divine guidance and protection. Back in the town, Carnegie manages to take the Bible from Solara before she escapes. But when he finally opens the book, he discovers it is written in Braille, a language he cannot read. His plans collapse entirely. His legs have been injured, his enforcer has abandoned him, and his grip on power begins to dissolve. Solara, meanwhile, takes Eli's belongings and heads back out into the world, now carrying on the spirit of his journey in her own way. The film ends with the completed Bible being printed at Alcatraz alongside other sacred texts, placed on a shelf between the Torah and the Quran in a quietly powerful visual statement about the equal value of all faith traditions. It is a deeply moving conclusion that reframes everything you watched before it. Cast. The cast of the Book of Eli is exceptional, led by one of the most iconic performances of Denzel Washington's already legendary career. Denzel Washington plays Eli, and his performance is the absolute foundation upon which the entire film rests. Washington brings a quiet, controlled intensity to the role that is unlike anything else in the post-apocalyptic genre. He is physically imposing, spiritually centered, and emotionally complex all at once. The way he carries himself throughout the film, the stillness in his eyes, the deliberate economy of his movements and words, all of it communicates a man who has been transformed by decades of solitary purpose. It is a masterclass in restrained, powerful acting. Gary Oldman plays Carnegie, the film's villain, and he delivers exactly the kind of layered, intelligent performance you would expect from one of the greatest character actors of his generation. Oldman does not play Carnegie as a raving madman. He plays him as a man of genuine vision and dangerous intellect, which makes him far more frightening than any simple brute could be. Mila Kunis plays Solara, and while the role was somewhat outside her comfort zone at the time, she handles it with real conviction. Solara's arc from a frightened girl trying to survive under Carnegie's control to a young woman inspired by Eli's example is one of the film's most satisfying emotional journeys. Ray Stevenson plays Riedrich, Carnegie's loyal lieutenant, in a role that is physically commanding and morally conflicted. Jennifer Beals plays Claudia, Solara's blind mother and Carnegie's companion. Tom Waits appears in a memorable supporting role as the town's general store owner. Michael Gambon and Francis de la Tour play the sinister elderly couple Eli and Solara encounter on the road. Release date and box office. The Book of Eli was released on January 15, 2010, in the United States. It was a wide theatrical release and it performed very strongly at the box office. The film was made on a production budget of approximately $80 million and went on to gross over $157 million worldwide, making it a considerable commercial success. It opened at number 1 at the North American box office in its opening weekend, which was a strong statement of audience interest and trust in the material. Trailer and reception. The theatrical trailer for the Book of Eli was widely praised and did an excellent job of capturing the film's tone without revealing its most significant plot details. It leaned heavily on the visual contrast between the devastated landscape and the quiet, composed presence of Denzel Washington, which was the perfect way to introduce audiences to the world of the film. Critical reception was mixed to positive. Many critics praised Washington's performance and the film's striking visual style, but were divided on some of its pacing choices and thematic ambitions. Audience reception was notably warmer than critical reception, with many viewers responding deeply to the film's spiritual themes and its meditation on the value of faith, knowledge, and cultural preservation. Over time, the Book of Eli has grown significantly in reputation and is now widely regarded as one of the strongest post-apocalyptic films of the 2000s and early 2010s. The film's score was composed by Atticus Ross, who would go on to win an Academy Award for his work on The Social Network later that same year. The music in the Book of Eli is sparse, atmospheric, and perfectly suited to the desolate world of the film. It adds an almost spiritual dimension to many of the quieter scenes and gives the action sequences a raw, urgent energy. Final thoughts. The Book of Eli is not simply an action film set in a ruined world. It is a deeply philosophical story about what human beings hold onto when everything else is stripped away. It asks what gives life meaning, what is worth protecting at any cost, and whether faith and purpose can sustain a person through the darkest and most hopeless of circumstances. The twist regarding Eli's blindness recontextualizes the entire film in a way that rewards careful viewers and encourages multiple viewings. Every choice Eli makes, every fight he wins, every step he takes across that broken landscape takes on a new and extraordinary dimension when you know what you know at the end. The Hughes Brothers crafted something genuinely rare with this film, a mainstream Hollywood action movie that takes ideas seriously, that respects its audience enough to ask hard questions, and that leaves you thinking long after the credits roll. Denzel Washington's performance belongs in the conversation alongside his very best work, and that is saying a great deal considering the career he has had. If you have not seen the Book of Eli, watch it. And if you have seen it, watch it again with the ending in mind from the very first frame. You will see an entirely different film. The Book of Eli, 2010, complete story breakdown. The world before the story begins. To truly understand the story of the Book of Eli, you first have to understand the world in which it takes place. 30 years before the events of the film, something catastrophic happened to planet Earth. The exact nature of the event is never fully explained, but the clues scattered throughout the film suggest it was a massive nuclear or military conflict that tore a hole in the sky itself. The ozone layer was destroyed or severely damaged, which means the sun now beats down on the Earth with a ferocity it never had before. People who look at the sky without eye protection risk going blind. The land is scorched gray and lifeless in most places. Vegetation is sparse. Animals are scarce. Water is one of the most valuable commodities left on Earth, more precious than money, more sought after than weapons. Human civilization, as it existed before the war, is completely gone. Cities are ruins. Roads are cracked and broken. Cars and trucks sit abandoned and rusted on highways that nobody uses anymore. Bridges have collapsed. Electricity exists only in places where someone powerful enough has managed to maintain a generator and fuel supply. Books, particularly religious texts, were largely destroyed in the aftermath of the war. Many survivors blamed religion, specifically the kind of passionate, all-consuming faith that can move people to war, for the destruction of the world. As a result, books of a religious nature were systematically burned and eliminated. The vast majority of people alive in this world have never read a Bible, never heard its words, and have no memory of what it contained. An entire generation has grown up in spiritual emptiness, with no framework of meaning, no moral foundation beyond survival, and no hope beyond the next meal or drink of water. This is the world into which the story of Eli walks. Eli begins his journey. The film opens in a forest that is completely silent and dead. The trees are bare, the ground is pale and ashen, and nothing moves except a hairless cat scavenging among the debris. A figure sits motionless in the shadows, perfectly still, waiting with extraordinary patience. This is Eli. He is dressed in weathered, layered clothing that protects him from the sun. He wears tinted goggles over his eyes. He carries a large pack on his back, a machete at his side, and a bow in his hands. He waits until the cat comes close enough, then kills it swiftly and cleanly for food. There is no waste in anything he does. Every action is deliberate and purposeful. That night, Eli makes camp in the burned-out shell of a destroyed building. He charges a small device using a hand-cranked generator, listens to music through earphones, and before sleeping, reads from a book by the light of a small lamp. The book is old, worn, clearly handled with tremendous care. He reads it with his fingers as much as with his eyes, tracing the pages with quiet reverence. He says a prayer before he sleeps, giving thanks for his food and his safety, and asking for continued guidance on his journey. It is a simple, private moment, but it tells you everything you need to know about who Eli is and what drives him. The next morning, Eli continues west. He walks across a landscape that looks like the surface of another planet. The road stretches out before him endlessly, cracked and faded, lined with abandoned vehicles and the ruins of the world that used to exist. He is calm, unhurried, and completely alone. He has been doing this for 30 years, and he will continue doing it until he reaches wherever he is going, or until he dies trying. The first threat on the road. Not far into his journey that day, Eli encounters a trap. A woman is lying in the middle of the road, apparently injured or dead. This is a classic ambush technique in this world. Eli spots it immediately. He does not rush forward to help. Instead, he stands at a distance and observes. Figures are hiding in and around the abandoned vehicles nearby, waiting for a traveler naive enough to stop. Eli has seen this before. He knows exactly what it is. He does not try to avoid the confrontation. Instead, he walks forward calmly and gives the men hiding there a chance to leave peacefully. They do not take it. They attack, and what follows is one of the most impressive and brutal fight sequences in the film. Eli moves through the group of attackers with frightening efficiency. He uses his machete with devastating precision, disabling and killing the men who come at him one after another. His movements are not theatrical or showy. They are economical, fast, and completely effective. He does not enjoy the violence. He does not celebrate it. When it is over, he stands among the bodies, looks at what has happened with what seems like genuine sadness, and moves on. This sequence establishes several crucial things about Eli. First, he is extraordinarily capable of protecting himself and what he carries. Second, he prefers peace and will offer it before resorting to violence. Third, there is something about the way he fights that seems almost preternatural, as if he moves with a kind of awareness or guidance that goes beyond ordinary human ability. The camera work during this sequence famously uses a near silhouette style that obscures some of the detail, adding to the sense that something unusual and almost supernatural is happening. Arriving at Carnegie's town. Eli eventually arrives at a small, fortified town built around a central bar and general store. The town has walls, guards, and a semblance of order, which in this world means someone powerful is in charge. That someone is Carnegie. The town is grim and oppressive. The people who live there exist essentially as subjects under Carnegie's authority. His men patrol the streets, control the water supply, and maintain order through fear and force. Eli enters the town looking for two things he needs to continue his journey: water to drink and a way to recharge his device. He goes to the bar, which is run by a man called the engineer, who also manages the town's power supply. The bar is crowded with rough, dangerous people. Eli sits quietly, drinks his water, and tries to avoid trouble. He is noticed immediately. In a world where most people are broken and frightened, a man who carries himself with Eli's kind of quiet confidence stands out like a signal fire. A group of men in the bar decide to test him. They are aggressive, threatening, and escalate quickly toward violence. Eli again tries to avoid the confrontation. He gives them a clear and direct warning about what will happen if they push further. They push further anyway. The resulting fight is fast and decisive. Eli puts down everyone who comes at him with the same calm efficiency he demonstrated on the road, and within moments, the entire group is incapacitated or dead. This fight is witnessed by Carnegie, who watches from a distance with great interest. Carnegie is not like the thugs in his employ. He is intelligent and perceptive, and he immediately recognizes that Eli is someone remarkable. He invites Eli to sit with him and speak. Carnegie and his obsession. Carnegie is the kind of villain who is frightening precisely because he is smart. He runs his town with a combination of genuine organizational ability and ruthless brutality. He provides water, which gives him power over everyone who needs it. He maintains roads and defenses, which gives him leverage. But Carnegie's true ambition goes far beyond this small town. He wants to build something much larger, a genuine empire over the ruins of civilization. And he knows that to do that, he needs the right words. Carnegie has an education and a sharp mind, and he understands something profound about human nature. He understands that people do not follow leaders only out of fear. The greatest powers in history have always combined fear with faith. They have given people something to believe in, a story that explains the world and their place in it, a moral framework that justifies the authority of those at the top. Carnegie has been searching for years for a Bible, because he knows that the words in that book have the power to make people obedient, devoted, and willing to sacrifice themselves for a cause. He wants to weaponize faith. During his conversation with Eli, Carnegie probes carefully, trying to understand who this man is and where he is going. Eli is equally careful in return, revealing nothing significant. Carnegie, sensing something interesting about Eli but not yet understanding what, offers him a place in his organization. Eli declines politely. Carnegie accepts this graciously, for now, and has Eli given a room for the night. He then sends Solara to Eli's room. Eli and Solara. Solara is a young woman who lives in Carnegie's town as a virtual prisoner. Her mother, Claudia, is Carnegie's companion, a blind woman who serves as his personal assistant and housekeeper. Carnegie uses the threat of harm to Claudia to keep Solara compliant, sending her to perform various services for his men. Sending Solara to Eli is both a reward offered to a potential recruit and a test of who Eli is. Eli treats Solara with complete respect. He does not take advantage of the situation. Instead, he shares his food with her, says grace before eating in a way that clearly confuses and intrigues her, and speaks to her briefly about his journey and his beliefs. Solara has never heard anyone say grace before. She has grown up in a world where faith and religious practice were things of a destroyed past. The simple act of giving thanks before a meal strikes her as something entirely foreign and genuinely moving. Before she leaves, Solara notices the book. She does not know what it is. She asks about it. Eli is evasive but not unkind. She files away what she has seen and returns to Carnegie, who questions her about what she observed in Eli's room. She mentions the book. Carnegie's entire demeanor changes. He becomes intensely focused and asks her to describe it precisely. When she does, he becomes convinced that Eli is carrying a Bible. Carnegie has spent years looking for one, sending his men across the wasteland in search of the last remaining copy. And now the book has walked into his town on the back of a lone traveler. The confrontation and escape. Carnegie approaches Eli the next morning with a very different energy. He is no longer making polite offers of employment. He wants the book. He is direct about it, and when Eli refuses to surrender it, Carnegie moves quickly to force the issue. His men surround Eli and attempt to take the book by force. What follows is another extraordinary fight. Eli battles through Carnegie's men with the same terrifying competence he has shown before. He retrieves his pack and his weapons and fights his way out of the town entirely, leaving a significant number of Carnegie's soldiers defeated behind him. Carnegie is furious but also deeply determined. He organizes a pursuit convoy. His right-hand man Redridge leads the chase with a group of heavily armed vehicles. They set out after Eli with orders to bring back the book at any cost. Meanwhile, Solara, moved by something she cannot quite articulate about Eli, the way he treated her, the prayers she witnessed, the quiet certainty in how he carries himself, decides to follow him. She slips out of the town and catches up with him on the road. Eli initially refuses to take her with him. He tells her firmly that she needs to go back. But Solara is determined, and eventually, after she demonstrates that she can handle herself to some degree, Eli accepts her presence with a reluctant pragmatism. As they walk together, Eli begins to teach her. He teaches her the same prayer he said before eating. He explains, in broad terms, that he is carrying something important to a place in the West where it will be safe and where it can be used for good rather than harm. Solara listens, asks questions, and slowly begins to understand that she is in the presence of someone entirely unlike anyone else she has ever met. Eli is not cruel, not selfish, not governed by the brutal survival logic of the world they live in. He operates on an entirely different set of principles, guided by a faith she is only beginning to understand. The old couple in the house. As Eli and Solara continue west, they come across an isolated house that appears inhabited. The two people living there are an elderly couple, George and Martha, who present themselves as kind, welcoming, and civilized, a jarring contrast to almost everything else in this world. They invite Eli and Solara inside for tea and offer them genuine hospitality. The house is decorated with relics of the old world, neatly kept and almost normal in appearance. But something is wrong. There are subtle signs that Eli picks up on almost immediately. The tea set is stained in a way that suggests something darker about the couple's history. The house is too carefully maintained, the welcome too practiced. George and Martha are cannibals. They take in travelers, give them tea laced with something to make them docile, and then kill them. Before the situation can deteriorate fully, Carnegie's convoy arrives. A violent confrontation erupts, and in the chaos, Eli and Solara manage to escape the house. The fighting between Eli and Carnegie's men outside the house is brutal and extended. Eli fights with firearms this time in addition to his machete, taking on multiple armed opponents with a precision and calmness that continues to seem almost impossible for a single human being. During this sequence, Eli is shot. The wound is serious. He keeps moving anyway. Carnegie, who has arrived with the convoy, gets close enough to Eli to deliver what should be a killing shot. But Eli survives and escapes with Solara, wounded but still moving, still heading west with the same unshakable determination. Carnegie is left behind, frustrated and damaged himself. His leg has been wounded in the confrontation, slowing him down significantly. But he is not done. He keeps pursuing. The road to the coast. After escaping the house, Eli and Solara continue their journey together, though Eli is now clearly weakened by his wound. He does not complain. He does not slow down more than he absolutely must. He continues to teach Solara as they walk, sharing wisdom, answering her questions about the book and about faith, and treating her with a consistent gentleness and respect that she has never received from anyone else in her life. In one of the film's most quietly powerful scenes, Eli explains to Solara why the book matters so much to him. He tells her that before the war, there were many copies of this book everywhere, so common that people stopped paying attention to what was in them. After the war, the books were burned. The words were lost. And Eli received what he describes as a calling, a voice, a direction, a sense of absolute purpose, telling him to find the last remaining copy and carry it west. He has been walking for 30 years in response to that calling. He has never doubted it. Not once. Solara asks him how he can be so certain. Eli's answer is simple and unshakable. He says that the voice told him, and he believed it. That faith, that complete and unquestioning trust in something beyond himself, is the engine that has driven him across the entire continent for 3 decades. They eventually reached the Pacific coast of California. The sight of the ocean is one of the film's most beautiful visual moments, a vast expanse of gray-blue water stretching out under a washed-out sky. Eli and Solara find a small boat and make their way across the water to Alcatraz Island. Alcatraz and the Sanctuary. Alcatraz Island, the famous former federal prison off the coast of San Francisco, has been transformed into something remarkable. A man named Lombardi has established a community of scholars, artists, musicians, and preservationists on the island. These are people dedicated to the idea that human knowledge and culture must be saved and protected, that the achievements of civilization must not be allowed to disappear entirely just because civilization itself has collapsed. They are collecting books, artwork, musical instruments, and written records of every kind, building an archive that could one day serve as the foundation for rebuilding human society. Lombardi welcomes Eli warmly and immediately understands the significance of what he has brought. He recognizes the Bible instantly and treats it with reverence. But here is where the film delivers its most stunning revelation. Eli, gravely wounded from the gunshot he sustained earlier, is too weak to do much physically. But he sits with Lombardi and his scribes, and he begins to dictate. He recites the entire text of the King James Bible from memory. Every word. Every chapter. Every verse. He speaks it all aloud from beginning to end, his voice weakening as his body fails but never losing its precision or certainty. The scribes write it all down as he speaks, transcribing the entire text word for word. And then, when it is done, Eli rests. And he does not wake up. The revelation of Eli's blindness. After Eli passes away, Lombardi and his people prepare the book for preservation. And it is only now, with the physical book in their hands, that the full truth of Eli's journey becomes apparent. The Bible that Eli carried was written in Braille. Eli was blind. He had been blind for some undetermined period of time, perhaps for most or all of the 30 years of his journey. He navigated the wasteland without the ability to see. He fought and defeated dozens of armed opponents without the ability to see. He read the Bible with his fingers, tracing the raised dots of Braille script. He found water, found shelter, avoided danger, and crossed an entire continent guided by something other than sight. This revelation is deliberately left open to interpretation by the filmmakers. There is no definitive explanation for how Eli managed to do what he did. The film does not reach down from the sky and announce a miracle. It simply presents the facts and lets you sit with them. Eli was blind. Eli walked across America. Eli survived everything. Eli delivered the book. You are free to decide what you believe about how that was possible. For most viewers, and the film seems to invite this reading strongly, the explanation is faith. Divine protection. A higher power guiding a man of absolute belief through 30 years of danger and hardship to complete a mission of preservation and hope. The blindness is not a contradiction of Eli's story. It is the completion of it. It is the final piece of evidence that something larger than a single human being was at work in everything you watched. Carnegie's collapse. Meanwhile, back in the town, Carnegie has managed to obtain the Bible from Solara before she escaped. He took it from her and held it with the triumphant possession of a man who has finally achieved his life's obsession. He called his followers together, ready to begin his plan to use the book's words to build his empire. He opened the Bible. And he could not read a single word. The entire text was in Braille. Carnegie, who cannot read Braille, held the most powerful book in the world in his hands and found it completely inaccessible to him. His plan was destroyed not by violence or resistance, but by the simple fact that the book was never meant for him. The words inside it, words of love and grace and sacrifice and hope, were locked away from a man who wanted them only as a weapon. Carnegie's situation deteriorates rapidly from this point. His leg wound is serious and potentially fatal without proper medical care. Riedrich, his chief enforcer, who had begun questioning Carnegie's methods and had shown signs of genuine feeling toward Solara, is dead. His authority over the town begins to dissolve without the strong leadership he can no longer provide. The water supply, his ultimate source of control, is running low. The empire he dreamed of building never materializes. Carnegie, who understood the power of words better than almost anyone alive, was ultimately undone by his inability to read the very words he sought to exploit. It is one of the film's most quietly perfect pieces of irony. Solara carries on. The final scene of the film focuses on Solara. She has escaped from Carnegie's town, carrying Eli's belongings, his machete, his pack, his equipment. She sets out on the road heading back into the world, walking with a purpose and a direction that mirrors the way Eli walked when we first met him. The parallel is intentional and deeply moving. Solara began the film as a frightened, compliant young woman with no direction and no hope, living under the thumb of a powerful and dangerous man. Through her time with Eli, she found something she had never had before. She found faith, not necessarily in the formal religious sense, but in the idea that there is something worth protecting, something worth sacrificing for, something worth walking toward even when the road is long and the world is hostile. She is not carrying the Bible anymore. The Bible is safe at Alcatraz, being preserved and printed for the future. But she is carrying something just as important. She is carrying the example of Eli's life, the memory of his faith and his patience and his courage, and the knowledge that one person guided by genuine purpose can accomplish something extraordinary in a broken world. The last shot of the film shows her walking away down the same kind of empty, cracked road where Eli's journey began. The world around her is still devastated and dangerous. Nothing about the external circumstances of her life has changed dramatically. But she has changed completely. And in this world, in any world, that is where every journey of consequence truly begins. What the story means. The complete story of the Book of Eli is ultimately not a story about violence, survival, or even religion in a narrow doctrinal sense. It is a story about the human need for meaning. In a world stripped of everything comfortable and familiar, the characters in this film are all searching for something to hold on to. Carnegie wants power and uses the language of faith to pursue it. The people of his town want safety and follow whoever provides it. Solara wants dignity and freedom and eventually finds it. And Eli wants only to complete a mission he received from a source beyond himself, a mission he has never questioned and never abandoned. The film asks you to consider what you would carry across 30 years of wasteland. What would you protect at the cost of everything else? What would keep you walking when every rational calculation told you to stop? For Eli, the answer is faith in a calling he received and a book whose words he believed could help rebuild what was lost. Whether you share his faith or not, the commitment and the integrity with which he lived that faith is impossible not to admire. The Book of Eli is a story about the survival not just of a man, but of an idea. And in the end, the idea survives. The Book of Eli, 2010, Actor's Life History. Denzel Washington, Eli. Denzel Hayes Washington Jr. was born on December 28, 1954, in Mount Vernon, New York. He was raised in a household shaped by faith and discipline. His father, Denzel Washington Sr., was a Pentecostal minister, and his mother, Lennis, ran a beauty parlor. The strong religious foundation of his upbringing would later inform many of the roles he chose throughout his career, including his portrayal of Eli in the Book of Eli, a character driven entirely by spiritual conviction. Washington grew up in a stable and loving home, but when his parents divorced during his early teenage years, the experience affected him deeply and he began to drift away from his studies and focus. He attended Fordham University in the Bronx, where he initially had no clear direction or ambition. It was during a summer break, while working at a YMCA camp, that a counselor told him he had a natural talent and charisma that should not go to waste. That observation planted a seed. Washington returned to Fordham with a renewed sense of purpose and began studying drama. He transferred to the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco to further develop his craft, and by the time he graduated, it was clear to everyone around him that he was not an ordinary talent. He was something rare. His early career included significant stage work and television appearances. He had a recurring role on the medical drama St. Elsewhere from 1982 to 1988, playing Dr. Philip Chandler, which brought him his first taste of widespread recognition. But it was his film work that would define his legacy. He appeared in Carbon Copy in 1981 and built steadily from there. His breakthrough in cinema came with Cry Freedom in 1987, in which he played South African anti-apartheid activist Steve Biko. The performance earned him his first Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor and announced to Hollywood that a major talent had arrived. 2 years later, he won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for his role in Glory in 1989, playing a runaway slave who becomes a soldier in the 1st All-Black Regiment of the Union Army during the Civil War. The performance was emotionally devastating and technically brilliant, and that Oscar win was only the beginning. He received further Academy Award nominations for Malcolm X in 1992, in which he delivered what many considered the greatest performance of his career as the iconic civil rights leader. The physical transformation, the vocal precision, the moral complexity he brought to that role remains one of the gold standards of biographical acting in cinema history. Washington won his second Academy Award, this time for Best Actor, for his role as corrupt Los Angeles police detective Alonzo Harris in Training Day in 2001. The role was a significant departure from the moral, upright characters he had built his reputation on, and he committed to it with a ferocity that shocked and impressed audiences and critics alike. He became only the second black actor in history to win the Best Actor Oscar, following Sidney Poitier, and the weight of that achievement was not lost on him. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, Washington built one of the most impressive filmographies in Hollywood. He starred in Philadelphia alongside Tom Hanks in 1993, He Got Game in 1998 directed by Spike Lee, The Hurricane in 1999, Remember the Titans in 2000, Man on Fire in 2004, The Manchurian Candidate in 2004, Inside Man in 2006, American Gangster in 2007, and The Great Debaters in 2007, which he also directed. Each of these films demonstrated a different dimension of his ability. He could play heroes and villains, coaches and criminals, soldiers and lawyers, and he brought the same absolute commitment to every single one of them. In his personal life, Washington has been married to Pauletta Pearson since 1983, a relationship of extraordinary stability and depth for an industry not known for lasting marriages. They have 4 children together. Washington has spoken often and openly about his faith, describing himself as a deeply committed Christian, and crediting God with guiding his career and his life. He has been involved in numerous charitable endeavors over the years, including significant support for the Boys and Girls Clubs of America. What makes Denzel Washington genuinely unique among actors of his generation is the combination of technical mastery and moral seriousness he brings to his work. He does not simply perform characters. He inhabits them completely, and he consistently chooses roles that engage with questions of justice, faith, sacrifice, and human dignity. His performance as Eli in the Book of Eli is a direct extension of who he is as a person and as an artist. The stillness, the faith, the quiet authority, none of that was invented for the role. It came from the man himself. Gary Oldman, Carnegie. Gary Leonard Oldman was born on March 21, 1958, in New Cross, London, England. His early life was shaped by hardship and instability in ways that would have broken many people but instead forged in him one of the most extraordinary acting instruments in the history of the medium. His father, Leonard Bertram Oldman, was a former Royal Navy sailor who struggled with alcoholism and abandoned the family when Gary was very young. Growing up without a stable father figure in a working-class London neighborhood during the 1960s was not an easy experience, and Oldman has spoken about those years with a mixture of honesty and hard-won perspective. He attended the Rose Bruford College of Theatre and Performance in London, graduating in 1979, and followed that with work at the Greenwich Young People's Theatre. His early stage career was prolific and ambitious, and he quickly developed a reputation as an actor of exceptional range and fearlessness. He was willing to go further than almost anyone else, emotionally and physically, in service of a character. That willingness to strip himself completely bare in a performance would become the defining characteristic of his career. His breakthrough in film came with two extraordinary roles released in the same year, 1986. He played Sid Vicious, the infamous bassist of the Sex Pistols, in Sid and Nancy, and he played the gay playwright Joe Orton in Prick Up Your Ears. Both performances were staggeringly good. Both required him to inhabit real people of tremendous complexity and darkness, and in both cases he did so with a total commitment that left audiences and critics genuinely stunned. At 28 years old, Gary Oldman was already being spoken of as one of the finest actors of his generation. What followed was one of the most remarkable careers in cinema history, not because it was smooth and celebrated every step of the way, but because Oldman consistently made bold, unexpected choices that kept reinventing what people thought he was capable of. He played Lee Harvey Oswald in JFK in 1991 in a small but electrifying role. He played Dracula in Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula in 1992, bringing a romantic tragedy to a character usually played as pure menace. He played Norman Stansfield, a corrupt DA agent, in Leon, the Professional in 1994, in a performance so wildly intense and unpredictable that it has become one of the most discussed villain portrayals in film history. He played the bomber in Air Force One in 1997. He played Pontius Pilate in The Contender in 2000. He played Sirius Black in the Harry Potter franchise beginning in 2004, bringing warmth and tragedy to a beloved character. He played Commissioner James Gordon across the entire Dark Knight trilogy for Christopher Nolan, giving the character a dignity and weight that perfectly complemented the larger world of those films. Oldman's personal life has been complicated and at times turbulent. He has been married 5 times. He has been open about his struggles with alcohol addiction, which reached its worst point in the 1990s and from which he has since recovered completely. He has described sobriety as one of the most important achievements of his life and speaks about it with genuine gratitude. The period of his addiction coincided with some of his most memorable performances, which speaks to the depth of his talent, but also to the personal cost at which it sometimes came. He received his first Academy Award nomination for Best Actor for his stunning portrayal of Winston Churchill in Darkest Hour in 2017, and he won the Oscar for that performance. The win was broadly celebrated in the film industry as a long-overdue recognition of a career of singular achievement. Many people who knew his work well felt the award was almost beside the point, Oldman had been one of the greatest actors alive for 30 years before the Academy finally acknowledged it, but the recognition was nonetheless warmly welcomed. As Carnegie in the Book of Eli, Oldman brings all of that accumulated craft and complexity to a character who could easily have been a one-dimensional power-hungry villain. Instead, he creates a man of genuine intelligence and terrible purpose, someone who understands the world well enough to exploit it but lacks the spiritual depth to understand why the book he so desperately wants will never be truly his. Mila Kunis, Solara. Milena Markovna Kunis was born on August 14, 1983, in Chernivtsi, which was then part of the Soviet Union and is now in Ukraine. Her family was Jewish and faced various degrees of anti-Semitic restriction in the Soviet system. Her father, Mark Kunis, was a mechanical engineer, and her mother, Elvira, was a physics teacher. When Mila was 7 years old, her family made the decision to emigrate to the United States. They arrived in Los Angeles with very little money and almost no English language ability, and the adjustment to American life was enormous. Mila has spoken about how hard her parents worked during those early years in America, and how the experience of being an immigrant child shaped her sense of gratitude and determination. She began taking acting classes at a young age, partly as a way to help her learn English more quickly, and it became immediately apparent that she had a natural ability. She began working in commercials and small television roles as a child. Her breakthrough came when she was cast as Jackie Burkhart in the enormously popular television sitcom That 70s Show, which began airing in 1998. She was just 14 years old at the time, and she would remain with the show for its entire 8-season run. The show made her a household name and gave her years of experience working on a large production with an ensemble cast that included Ashton Kutcher, Topher Grace, and several other actors who would go on to significant careers. What many people do not know is that Mila Kunis was also the voice of Meg Griffin on the animated series Family Guy, a role she has maintained since the show began in 1999. She has provided that voice for decades alongside her film career, and it remains one of the most enduring and recognizable pieces of her body of work. Her transition to serious film work required her to prove herself to audiences and casting directors who associated her primarily with television comedy. She accomplished that with considerable success. Her role as Solara in the Book of Eli in 2010 was one of her first significant dramatic film appearances, and she held her own opposite Denzel Washington and Gary Oldman in a way that silenced most doubters. Later that same year, she gave an even more critically acclaimed performance in Black Swan, directed by Darren Aronofsky, playing a manipulative and sensual rival dancer opposite Natalie Portman. That performance earned her a Golden Globe nomination and firmly established her as a dramatic actress of real ability. She went on to star in Friends with Benefits in 2011, Oz the Great and Powerful in 2013, and Jupiter Ascending in 2015, among many other films. In her personal life, she married her former That 70s Show co-star Ashton Kutcher in 2015, and they have 2 children together. Their relationship, which began after both had been through other significant relationships, has been widely described as one of the genuinely happy and stable partnerships in the entertainment industry. Kunis has spoken candidly over the years about the challenges of growing up in the public eye, navigating the transition from child actress to adult performer, and dealing with the particular pressures placed on women in Hollywood regarding appearance and age. Her combination of intelligence, humor, and directness in interviews has earned her a reputation as one of the more authentic and grounded personalities in the film industry. Ray Stevenson, Redridge. Ray Stevenson was born on May 25, 1964, in Lisburn, Northern Ireland, and was raised primarily in England after his family relocated during his childhood. His father was a Royal Air Force pilot, which meant the family moved frequently, and Stevenson grew up across various parts of England before settling and pursuing his education seriously. He studied at the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School, one of the most prestigious acting conservatories in the United Kingdom, and graduated with a thorough classical training that would serve him throughout a career defined by physically demanding and morally complex roles. His career began primarily in British television, where he worked steadily through the 1990s in various period dramas and series. He gained significant international attention for his role as Titus Pullo in the HBO and BBC co-production Rome, which aired from 2005 to 2007. The series was lavishly produced and critically acclaimed, and Stevenson's performance as the rough, loyal, surprisingly tender Roman soldier became one of the most beloved characters of that era of prestige television. The role showcased his ability to combine genuine physical menace with unexpected emotional depth, a combination that would characterize his best work throughout his career. He went on to play the Punisher in Punisher: War Zone in 2008, a role that required an enormous physical transformation and an unflinching commitment to the brutality of the character. He appeared in the Thor films for Marvel, playing the Asgardian warrior Volstagg beginning in 2011. He had significant roles in the Divergent franchise, in the television series Black Sails, and in numerous other productions across film and television. Stevenson passed away on May 21, 2023, just days before his 59th birthday, following a brief illness. The news was met with an enormous outpouring of grief from colleagues, fans, and the wider entertainment industry. Tributes described him consistently as one of the warmest, most generous, and most professional people in the business, a man who brought the same complete commitment to every role regardless of its size and who made every production he was part of better simply by being in it. His loss was widely described as immense, and his body of work stands as a testament to a talent and a character that left a genuine mark on everyone fortunate enough to work with him. Jennifer Beals, Claudia. Jennifer Beals was born on December 19, 1963, in Chicago, Illinois. Her background is one of the most genuinely interesting in Hollywood, combining academic achievement with artistic instinct in a way that has made her one of the more thoughtful and intellectually engaged performers of her generation. Her father, Alfred Beals, was a black grocery store owner, and her mother, Jean, was an Irish-American school teacher. Growing up biracial in Chicago during the 1960s and 1970s gave Beals a perspective on race, identity, and belonging that has informed her work and her public statements throughout her career. She was accepted to Yale University, one of the most prestigious academic institutions in the United States, and was studying there when she was cast in what would become one of the most iconic films of the 1980s. Flashdance, released in 1983, turned Jennifer Beals into an international star almost overnight. She played Alex Owens, a welder by day and exotic dancer by night who dreams of becoming a professional dancer. The film was a massive commercial success, and the image of Beals in her torn sweatshirt became one of the defining visual icons of that decade. The film's soundtrack was equally enormous, and the cultural footprint of Flashdance extended far beyond cinema into fashion, music, and popular culture more broadly. Beals returned to Yale after the success of Flashdance and completed her degree in American literature, which speaks volumes about her priorities and her sense of self. She was not willing to let sudden fame define her completely or derail the education she valued. After graduating, she worked steadily in film and television, building a career of genuine variety and substance rather than simply capitalizing on her early fame. Her most significant later work came with the television series The L Word, which began airing in 2004 on Showtime and ran for 6 seasons. She played Bette Porter, a complex, driven, deeply flawed and deeply compelling character, and her performance was widely praised as one of the anchoring achievements of the series. The show was groundbreaking in its representation and dealt with subject matter that American television had rarely addressed so directly and humanely. Beals brought enormous intelligence and emotional investment to Bette throughout the run of the series and reprised the role in the revival series The L Word, Generation Q beginning in 2019. Throughout her career, Beals has been an outspoken advocate for civil rights, racial equality, and LGBTQ representation. She has used her platform thoughtfully and consistently, and her advocacy has been as much a part of her public identity as her acting work. In the Book of Eli, she plays Claudia with a quiet, dignified sorrow that communicates volumes about a woman trapped in terrible circumstances, but maintaining her inner dignity despite everything. Tom Waits, the engineer. Thomas Allen Waits was born on December 7, 1949, in Pomona, California. He is primarily known to the world not as an actor but as one of the most singular and influential musicians and songwriters of the 20th century, a man whose gravelly, weathered voice and extraordinary compositional imagination have produced a body of work that defies easy categorization and continues to influence musicians across virtually every genre. That he is also a genuinely excellent character actor is somewhat less widely known, but the evidence of it is scattered across several decades of memorable film performances. Waits grew up in a family with deep musical roots and spent much of his early life developing the wide-ranging, eclectic taste in music, literature, and American folklore that would define his artistic identity. He began performing in clubs in Los Angeles in the early 1970s and released his debut album Closing Time in 1973. His music drew from jazz, blues, vaudeville, spoken word, and a dozen other traditions, and his voice, one of the most distinctive instruments in popular music history, became more ravaged and extraordinary with every passing decade. His acting career began in earnest when Francis Ford Coppola cast him in One from the Heart in 1982. He went on to appear in Rumblefish and The Outsiders, also for Coppola, in 1983. He played Rudy, a memorable and eccentric supporting character in Jim Jarmusch's Down by Law in 1986. He appeared in Robert Altman's Short Cuts in 1993, in Mystery Men in 1999, in Coffee and Cigarettes in 2003, and in numerous other films over the years. He played Renfield, the insect-eating servant of Dracula, in Bram Stoker's Dracula in 1992 in a wonderfully unhinged performance that perfectly suited the material. What all of Waits's film performances share is an absolute authenticity. He never seems to be acting in any conventional sense. He simply seems to be there, inhabiting whatever strange corner of the world of film has placed him in, with the same organic completeness he brings to his music. In the Book of Eli, his role as the engineer, the man who runs the town's general store and power supply, is small but perfectly observed. Michael Gambon, George. Michael John Gambon was born on October 19, 1940, in Cabra, Dublin, Ireland, and was raised in London from the age of 6 after his family relocated. He trained as an engineer before finding his way to acting, studying at the Dublin Gate Theatre and later working under Laurence Olivier at the National Theatre in London. His theatrical career was enormous and celebrated, encompassing Shakespeare, Beckett, Pinter, and virtually every other major dramatic tradition of the 20th century. He was knighted in 1998 for his services to drama, becoming Sir Michael Gambon, a recognition of a theatrical career of extraordinary breadth and distinction. To international film audiences, Gambon is perhaps best known for taking over the role of Professor Albus Dumbledore in the Harry Potter film franchise following the death of Richard Harris after the second film. He played Dumbledore in 6 films, bringing his own interpretation of warmth, wisdom, and occasionally fierce authority to a beloved character. His performance gave the later, darker installments of the franchise a grounding and moral weight that was enormously valuable. But Gambon's film and television career extended far beyond Dumbledore. He was extraordinary in The Singing Detective, Dennis Potter's landmark BBC miniseries from 1986, in a performance that is widely regarded as one of the finest in the history of British television. He appeared in Gosford Park, The Cook, the Thief, His Wife and Her Lover, Sleepy Hollow, Sky Captain and The World of Tomorrow, and dozens of other productions. He worked consistently and prodigiously for 6 decades, bringing the same commitment and craft to every role regardless of its size. Gambon passed away on September 28, 2023, at the age of 82, following a bout of pneumonia. His death was mourned deeply throughout the entertainment world and beyond, with tributes pouring in from colleagues, directors, and fans around the globe. He was remembered as an actor of incomparable ability, and as a man of warmth, generosity, and humor who enriched every production he was part of. In the Book of Eli, his brief but memorable appearance as the sinister George demonstrates the ease with which a great actor can make even a small role feel essential. The Book of Eli, 2010, budget, production, and funny behind-the-scenes moments. The budget and making of the film. The Book of Eli was produced with a budget of approximately $80 million, which for a post-apocalyptic action film of its scale and ambition was considered a reasonable but not extravagant sum by Hollywood standards. The film was financed and produced by Alcon Entertainment, a production company founded by Broderick Johnson and Andrew Kosov, and distributed theatrically by Warner Brothers Pictures. Alcon Entertainment had developed a strong relationship with Warner Brothers over several years, and The Book of Eli was one of the most ambitious productions they had undertaken together at that point. The decision to shoot the film primarily in New Mexico was driven by a combination of practical and creative considerations. New Mexico offered substantial tax incentives for film productions, which helped stretch the budget significantly, and the landscape of the region, with its vast, bleached deserts, cracked earth, and enormous empty skies, was almost perfectly suited to the visual world the Hughes brothers wanted to create. The production team did not need to build an entirely artificial post-apocalyptic environment from scratch. The natural terrain of New Mexico did a remarkable amount of that work on its own. Additional shooting took place in the Bisbee Badlands, a remote and extraordinarily striking geological formation in northwestern New Mexico that looks almost alien in its appearance. When you watch certain sequences in the film and find yourself wondering whether what you are seeing is real or constructed, the answer is often that it is entirely real and that the Earth itself simply looks that otherworldly in that part of the American Southwest. The production design team, led by Guy Bucuvelas, worked extensively to transform existing locations into the ruined towns and devastated highways of the film's world. Abandoned buildings were dressed and aged further. Vehicles were sourced from junkyards, modified, and arranged along roads to create the impression of a mass evacuation that took place decades ago and was simply never cleaned up. The attention to detail in the production design is one of the film's most underappreciated qualities. Every location feels lived in and decayed in a specific, authentic way that suggests a real history rather than a constructed set. The cinematographer Don Burgess made the deliberate choice to shoot the film with a heavily desaturated color palette, draining almost all warmth and color from the image to create a world that looks bleached, exhausted, and dying. This was achieved both in camera and through extensive post-production color grading. The result is a film that has one of the most distinctive and immediately recognizable visual identities of any post-apocalyptic movie ever made. Every frame looks like a faded photograph of a world that used to be vivid and is now slowly losing even the memory of color. The action sequences required substantial preparation and coordination. Denzel Washington worked with choreographer and martial arts coordinator Jeff Imada, who had previously collaborated with the Hughes brothers on their earlier films. Washington trained extensively in the Kali style of Filipino martial arts, which is a weapons-based combat system that emphasizes efficiency and economy of movement over theatrical display. The style suited the character of Eli perfectly, a man who fights with absolute precision and no wasted motion. Washington committed to the physical training with the same seriousness he brings to every aspect of his preparation for a role, and the result is fight sequences that look genuinely different from anything else in the genre because the underlying technique is real and specific rather than generically cinematic. The iconic opening fight sequence, filmed largely as a near silhouette against a bleached sky, was technically very challenging to execute. The lighting conditions required precise control to maintain the silhouette effect while keeping enough detail visible for the action to be comprehensible. Multiple cameras were used to capture the sequence from various angles, and the editing was handled with considerable care to maintain both the visual style and the clarity of the spatial relationships between the characters. The sequence took several days to film despite its relatively short running time in the finished movie. The town set, where Carnegie rules and where much of the film's middle section takes place, was built on location rather than on a studio backlit. The production team constructed the fortified walls, the bar, the general store, and the surrounding structures as physical sets that the cast and crew could inhabit completely. This decision to build in the real environment rather than on a controlled studio stage added enormously to the authenticity of the performances and the visual texture of the scenes, but it also meant that the cast and crew were working in genuine desert conditions throughout the shoot, dealing with extreme heat, blowing dust, and the physical challenges of working in remote locations far from standard studio infrastructure. The score was composed by Atticus Ross, who worked on the film before his Academy Award-winning collaboration with Trent Reznor on The Social Network later that same year. Ross created a sparse, electronic-inflected orchestral score that perfectly matched the film's tonal world. The music is quiet where it needs to be quiet, building only gradually and with great restraint to emotional climaxes that earn their impact because they have not been forced on the audience. It is a score that respects the intelligence of the material and the audience in equal measure. The film wrapped principal photography on schedule and within its budget, which is a significant achievement for a production of its complexity and the difficult conditions under which it was made. Post-production was handled with the same careful attention to the film's distinctive visual and sonic identity, and the final cut delivered by the Hughes Brothers was largely the film that was released theatrically, without the extensive reshoots or editorial battles that plague many large-scale Hollywood productions. Funny and memorable moments on set. Despite the extremely serious and often bleak tone of the film, the set of the Book of Eli was apparently far from a grim place to work. Multiple cast and crew members have spoken over the years about the atmosphere on set, and the picture that emerges is of a production that maintained its sense of humor and warmth even while creating one of the most visually desolate films of its era. Denzel Washington, who has a well-documented reputation on film sets for being both intensely professional and genuinely funny, was apparently a constant source of laughter for the cast and crew between takes. Washington is known among his colleagues for a very dry, quick wit that catches people off guard, and for a complete lack of any sense of his own legendary status. People who work with him consistently describe being surprised by how approachable, normal, and funny he is in person, given how towering and serious his on-screen presence tends to be. On the set of the Book of Eli, Washington reportedly spent a great deal of time between the demanding action sequences cracking jokes with the crew, doing impressions, and generally refusing to allow the austere seriousness of the material to set the tone for the working environment off-camera. One frequently mentioned behind-the-scenes dynamic was the contrast between Washington's absolute physical commitment during the intense fight and action sequences and his completely relaxed, almost casual demeanor the moment the director called cut. Cast members noted that Washington could go from executing a perfectly choreographed and physically demanding combat sequence to laughing and telling stories with the crew in a matter of seconds, as if switching between two entirely different modes of being. The ability to access that kind of intensity on demand and then release it completely is one of the hallmarks of truly elite screen actors, and seeing it in person apparently made a significant impression on his co-stars, particularly Mila Kunis, who was still relatively early in her film career at that point. Mila Kunis herself has spoken in interviews about the experience of filming in the New Mexico desert and the particular challenges it presented. The heat during the summer months of the shoot was genuinely extreme, and the dust that blew constantly across the desert locations got into everything: costumes, equipment, food, and the eyes and mouths of everyone on set. Kunis described the experience of eating lunch on location and discovering that every meal had a slight additional crunch to it that had nothing to do with the food itself. She spoke about this with characteristic humor, noting that the desert essentially seasoned every meal for free throughout the entire shoot. Gary Oldman, who is known among film industry colleagues as an actor who prepares with extraordinary intensity, and then leaves that intensity entirely behind when the cameras stop rolling, was reportedly excellent company between takes. Oldman has a wide range of interests outside of acting, including music, particularly piano, and he is known as someone who engages with genuine curiosity and warmth with everyone on a production regardless of their position or status. Crew members on various productions have spoken about the experience of having a conversation with Oldman between setups and being surprised by how funny, relaxed, and interested in other people he is, given the often terrifying intensity of the characters he typically plays. The physical demands of filming in the Bisty Badlands location, where some of Eli's solo journey sequences were captured, produced their own category of memorable moments. The landscape, while visually extraordinary, is genuinely challenging to work in. The ground is uneven and fragile, the temperatures fluctuate dramatically between day and night, and the remoteness of the location meant that any logistical problem, from a piece of equipment breaking down to a cast member needing medical attention, required considerably more time and effort to resolve than it would on a conventional studio shoot. Camera operators and crew members working in that environment spent a significant portion of each day simply managing the practical challenges of keeping equipment functioning and people comfortable in an environment that was not designed with film production in mind. The scenes involving the old couple's house, which required Gary Oldman and a significant portion of the production to travel to a location some distance from the main base, apparently produced several memorable logistical adventures. The coordination required to move the full convoy of vehicles, crew, cast, and equipment to a remote location for a complex sequence involving gunfights, vehicles, and multiple simultaneous camera setups was considerable. And the inevitable small disasters that accumulate over the course of any complicated film day apparently provided substantial material for the running jokes that developed naturally over the course of a long shoot. Tom Waits, who appeared in the film in his role as the engineer, brought an energy to the set that multiple people involved in the production have described as entirely unique. Waits, who is by any measure one of the most genuinely eccentric and original creative personalities in American culture, apparently treated the film set with the same mixture of deep seriousness and cheerful absurdist humor that characterizes his public persona generally. His scenes were filmed relatively quickly, but his presence on set during those days apparently left a strong impression on everyone who was there. There is something about being in the physical presence of someone whose creative achievements are as singular as Tom Waits that tends to make people pay close attention, and the cast and crew apparently did exactly that. The Hughes brothers, Alan and Albert, who directed the film together, have spoken in various interviews about the experience of working with such an accomplished ensemble cast and the particular dynamic that develops when a group of serious, highly skilled performers come together on a challenging production in a difficult environment. They described the set as one in which professionalism was absolute during the work itself but completely relaxed in the moments between, and they credited Washington in particular for setting a tone that was both demanding and enjoyable. The brothers noted that Washington's commitment to the material was total and that his preparation was so thorough that it created a foundation of security for everyone else in the scenes with him. When you are working opposite someone who is that prepared and that present, it makes your own work better simply by raising the level of the environment around you. The final days of the shoot, which included some of the most emotionally demanding material in the film, were apparently marked by a genuine sense of collective achievement among the cast and crew. The conditions had been difficult throughout, the material was serious and emotionally weighty, and the technical challenges of executing the film's distinctive visual style in real locations had been considerable. When the last day of principal photography arrived and the last setup was completed, the sense of shared accomplishment that the production team felt was apparently significant. Long shoots in challenging conditions tend to create strong bonds among the people who endure them together, and the Book of Eli was that kind of production in the best possible sense. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the making of the Book of Eli and the funny and memorable moments that happened behind the scenes, please give this video a like because it genuinely helps grow this channel and bring this kind of content to more people who love film. Share this video with your friends who love movies and want to know what really goes on when the cameras are not rolling. And if you have not subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell notification so you never miss a video. There is much more great content on the way and you do not want to miss a single one. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the very next video. You said, give me cultural and historical details of this movie. Give me cultural and historical details of this movie. 13:17 Claude responded, The Book of Eli, 2010, Cultural and Historical Details. The Book of Eli, 2010, Cultural and Historical Details. The cultural foundation of the film. The Book of Eli is not simply a post-apocalyptic action film built on explosions and survival instincts. It is a film deeply rooted in centuries of cultural, religious, and historical context that gives it a weight and meaning far beyond its genre surface. To truly appreciate what the Hughes Brothers created with this film, you need to understand the layers of history and culture that are embedded in every significant choice the story makes, from the central importance of the Bible as an object, to the way Carnegie plans to use it, to the broader conversation the film is having about faith, power, civilization, and the preservation of human knowledge. Every major element of this story has roots that stretch back hundreds and in some cases thousands of years, and understanding those roots transforms your experience of watching the film entirely. The most fundamental cultural question the film raises is this: what happens to human civilization when the stories that hold it together are destroyed? This is not a new question. It is one that historians, philosophers, and religious scholars have been grappling with for as long as human beings have organized themselves into societies. Every civilization in history has been built on a foundation of shared stories, shared beliefs, and shared values that give a group of people a common identity and a common sense of purpose. When those stories are lost or destroyed, civilizations collapse. This has happened repeatedly throughout human history, and the world of the Book of Eli is essentially a dramatization of what that collapse looks like at its most extreme. The film draws directly and consciously on the long and extraordinary history of the Bible as a cultural object. The Bible is not simply a religious text. It is one of the most culturally influential documents in the history of human civilization, shaping the laws, art, literature, music, philosophy, and social structures of enormous portions of the world for more than 2,000 years. Understanding that history is essential to understanding why Carnegie wants the book so badly, and why Eli has sacrificed 30 years of his life to protect it. The Bible as a cultural and historical object. The history of the Bible as a physical object is one of the most dramatic stories in human cultural history, and the Book of Eli is in direct conversation with that history throughout its entire running time. The Bible was not always widely available. For most of its history, it was an extremely rare and expensive object, handwritten by monks and scholars, owned primarily by the church and by wealthy individuals, and completely inaccessible to the vast majority of ordinary people. The idea that an ordinary person could own a Bible and read it privately was, for most of Christian history, essentially impossible. The invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg in the mid-15th century changed this completely. The Gutenberg Bible, printed around 1455, was one of the first major books produced using movable type printing, and it began a revolution in the availability of the written word that would eventually transform European civilization entirely. As printing technology spread and improved, the cost of producing books fell dramatically, and the Bible became increasingly accessible to ordinary people for the first time in history. This accessibility was one of the driving forces behind the Protestant Reformation, which began in 1517 when Martin Luther challenged the authority of the Catholic Church. Luther argued that every Christian should have direct access to the Bible in their own language rather than relying on the Church to interpret it for them, and his translation of the Bible into German became one of the most widely distributed printed texts of the 16th century. The King James Bible, which is specifically the version Eli is carrying in the film, has its own extraordinary history that makes it particularly significant as a cultural object. It was commissioned by King James I of England in 1604 and completed in 1611 by a team of 47 scholars working across several different translation committees. The goal was to produce a definitive English translation of the Bible that would be both theologically sound and literarily beautiful, a text that could be read aloud in church with a power and majesty that would move congregations deeply. The translators succeeded beyond any reasonable expectation. The King James Bible is widely regarded as one of the greatest achievements in the history of the English language, a text whose prose style and rhythms influenced virtually every major writer in the English-speaking world for centuries afterward. Its phrases and images permeated English literature, law, political rhetoric, and everyday speech so thoroughly that many people use expressions derived from the King James Bible without knowing their origin. When Eli carries this specific version of the Bible across a devastated America, he is carrying not just a religious text but one of the foundational documents of English-speaking civilization. The film's premise, that after the apocalypse all Bibles were deliberately destroyed by survivors who blamed religion for the war, also has strong historical precedent. The destruction of sacred texts has been a recurring feature of historical conflicts and power struggles throughout human history. The burning of the Library of Alexandria, though its exact circumstances are debated by historians, represents the most famous example in the ancient world of the catastrophic loss of accumulated human knowledge. The burning of books by authoritarian regimes in the 20th century, most notoriously by the Nazi regime in Germany beginning in 1933, demonstrated that the deliberate destruction of texts remained a tool of political and cultural control in the modern era. The Chinese Cultural Revolution of the 1960s involved systematic destruction of texts, artifacts, and cultural objects associated with traditional Chinese civilization. The pattern repeats across cultures and centuries because destroying a people's stories and sacred texts is one of the most effective ways of destroying their identity and their resistance. The historical tradition of wandering prophets and sacred missions. Eli himself as a character belongs to a very long tradition in religious and cultural history of the solitary wanderer carrying a sacred mission. This archetype appears across virtually every major religious and mythological tradition in human history, and understanding it deepens your appreciation of what the film is doing with his character enormously. In the Jewish and Christian biblical tradition, the figure of the wandering prophet is central. Moses spent 40 years leading the Israelites through the wilderness toward the Promised Land, guided by divine instruction and sustained by faith in a mission whose completion he himself would not live to see. The prophet Elijah, whose name Eli's character almost certainly references, was a solitary figure who moved through the ancient world carrying the word of God and protecting it against the corrupting influence of false prophets and power-hungry rulers. The parallels between the biblical Elijah and the film's Eli are extensive and clearly intentional. Both are solitary figures operating in a world where spiritual truth is under assault from those who would use religion as a tool of control. Both are sustained by a direct connection to a divine calling that others cannot understand or share. Both ultimately complete their missions and pass on their legacy to a younger generation. The tradition of the Christian pilgrim walking a long and difficult road in service of a spiritual mission also informs Eli's character deeply. Medieval Christian pilgrimage culture was one of the most significant cultural phenomena of the Middle Ages, with millions of pilgrims undertaking long and dangerous journeys to sacred sites across Europe and the Holy Land. The Camino de Santiago in Spain, the Via Francigena in Italy, and the pilgrimage roads leading to Canterbury in England were traveled by hundreds of thousands of people every year throughout the medieval period. These pilgrims walked through dangerous landscapes, faced robbery, illness, and extreme weather, and kept walking because their faith in the spiritual significance of their journey was stronger than their fear of the obstacles in front of them. Eli is, in a very real sense, a post-apocalyptic pilgrim. The figure of the wandering warrior monk appears in numerous other cultural traditions as well. In Japanese culture, the ronin, a samurai without a master who travels alone through a dangerous world living by a strict personal code, is one of the most enduring figures in Japanese storytelling. The similarities between Eli and the classic ronin figure are significant enough that the Book of Eli has frequently been discussed in the context of Eastern as well as Western cultural traditions. The combination of extraordinary martial skill and deep spiritual discipline, the preference for peace but the complete willingness to use violence when necessary, and the solitary journey through a hostile landscape guided by personal code rather than institutional authority all place Eli firmly within this broader cross-cultural archetype. Carnegie and the historical use of religion as political control. Carnegie's plan to use the Bible as a tool of political and social control is not a fictional invention by the filmmakers. It is grounded in a very specific and extensively documented pattern in human history that stretches across thousands of years and virtually every major civilization on Earth. The use of religious texts and religious authority to consolidate and maintain political power is one of the oldest strategies in the history of governance, and Carnegie's understanding of it marks him as a genuinely historically literate villain. The relationship between religious authority and political power has been one of the central dynamics of human civilization since the earliest recorded societies. In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh was not merely a political ruler but a living god, whose authority was both political and divine simultaneously. In medieval Europe, the Catholic Church wielded enormous political power precisely because it controlled access to the sacred texts and the rituals that people believed determined their eternal fate. Kings sought and sometimes required the blessing of the Pope to legitimize their authority, and the threat of excommunication, being cut off from the Church and therefore from God, was one of the most powerful political weapons available in the medieval world. The Reformation, which broke the Catholic Church's monopoly on biblical interpretation and sacred authority, was as much a political revolution as a religious one, and the wars of religion that followed it across Europe in the 16th and 17th centuries demonstrated exactly how violently people would fight over the right to control the meaning of sacred texts. Carnegie understands this history intuitively even if he could not articulate it in academic terms. He knows that the people of his broken world are spiritually hungry, desperate for meaning and purpose and a framework that explains their suffering. He knows that whoever gives them that framework will have a hold over them that no amount of weapons or water alone could provide. He wants to be that person, and he wants the Bible to be his instrument. This pattern continued into the modern era in various forms. Colonial powers throughout history used religious conversion as a tool of cultural domination, using the spread of Christian missionaries alongside military and economic conquest as a means of transforming the identities and values of colonized peoples in ways that made them more governable. 20th century totalitarian regimes, while often officially atheist, frequently understood the psychological power of religious-style ritual and symbolism and incorporated them into their own political cultures. The elaborate ceremonies, the sacred texts replaced by political manifestos, the prophetic leaders, the promises of a future paradise, all of these borrowed directly from religious traditions while claiming to reject them. Carnegie is, in this context, a figure who belongs to a very long line of historical actors who understood that the most durable power is not physical but spiritual and psychological. His failure to read the Braille Bible at the end of the film is therefore not just a plot twist but a deeply satisfying cultural statement. The words that have the power to give people genuine faith, genuine hope, and genuine moral grounding are fundamentally incompatible with the desire to use them as weapons of control. Carnegie could possess the book physically but never access its actual power, because that power requires approaching the text with humility and openness rather than calculation and ambition. Alcatraz and the preservation of human knowledge. The choice of Alcatraz Island as the location of the sanctuary dedicated to preserving human knowledge is one of the most culturally and historically resonant decisions in the entire film. Alcatraz is one of the most symbolically loaded locations in American cultural history, and placing a community of scholars and preservationists there in the post-apocalyptic world creates a layered and meaningful conversation between the location's past and its transformed purpose in the film. In reality, Alcatraz Island served as a federal penitentiary from 1934 to 1963, housing some of the most dangerous criminals in America in a facility deliberately designed to make escape impossible. It was a place defined by confinement, punishment, and the deliberate suppression of freedom. The irony of transforming this specific location into a sanctuary of knowledge, freedom of thought, and cultural preservation in the world of the film is clearly intentional. In the post-apocalyptic world, the prison has become a library, the island of confinement has become an island of refuge, and the place that once represented the worst of civilization now represents its best hope for survival. The broader concept of a dedicated institution for the preservation of human knowledge and culture has deep historical roots that the film draws on consciously. The Great Library of Alexandria, founded in the 3rd century BC in Egypt, was arguably the most ambitious such institution in the ancient world, a systematic attempt to collect all of human knowledge in one place and make it accessible to scholars. Its eventual destruction, which occurred gradually rather than in a single catastrophic event as popular mythology sometimes suggests, has been mourned for centuries as one of the great cultural losses in human history. The institution at Alcatraz in the Book of Eli is essentially a post-apocalyptic library of Alexandria, a sanctuary of human knowledge built against the forces of destruction and ignorance. The tradition of monastic preservation of knowledge in medieval Europe is another historical parallel the film evokes strongly. When the Roman Empire collapsed in the 5th century AD and Western Europe entered a period of significant political and cultural disruption, it was largely the monasteries of the Catholic Church that preserved the literary and intellectual heritage of classical civilization. Monks copied manuscripts by hand for centuries, preserving texts in Greek, Latin, and other languages that might otherwise have been entirely lost. The monasteries were islands of literacy and learning in a world where both had become rare and precious commodities. Lombardy's community at Alcatraz performs exactly this function in the world of the Book of Eli, serving as a monastic sanctuary in a world that has otherwise lost its connection to its own intellectual and spiritual heritage. The final image of the completed Bible being placed on a shelf alongside the Torah and the Quran is one of the film's most quietly powerful cultural statements. By presenting these three sacred texts as equals, each deserving of preservation and respect, each representing a tradition of human spiritual searching that has value regardless of one's own personal beliefs, the film makes a statement about religious pluralism and cultural respect that transcends the specific Christian framework of Eli's personal mission. The book he carried was a Bible, but the principle it represented was universal. All human attempts to understand existence, to build ethical frameworks, and to find meaning in suffering are worth preserving. That is not a narrowly religious statement. It is a profoundly humanist one. The American frontier tradition and post-apocalyptic culture. The Book of Eli also belongs to a specifically American cultural tradition that extends from the earliest days of the nation's self-conception. The lone figure moving across a vast, dangerous, and largely empty landscape guided by a personal moral code and a sense of providential mission is one of the oldest and most enduring archetypes in American cultural mythology. It appears in the Puritan tradition of the 17th century, in which the American wilderness was understood as both a physical and spiritual test that the faithful must endure on their way to building the city on a hill. It appears in the tradition of the Western, in which the lone gunfighter or marshal brings order to the lawless frontier through a combination of skill, courage, and moral clarity. It appears in the road movie tradition, in which the American highway becomes a space of self-discovery and spiritual testing. Eli draws on all of these traditions simultaneously. He is a Puritan pilgrim, a Western hero, and a road movie protagonist all at once, and the post-apocalyptic landscape of the film transforms the American continent itself into a kind of extended spiritual test. The fact that the film ends on the Pacific coast, at the western edge of the continent, is not accidental. The westward movement has deep symbolic meaning in American cultural history, associated with progress, destiny, and the fulfillment of a national mission. Eli's journey west is both a literal movement across geography and a symbolic completion of an American cultural narrative that stretches back to the earliest days of European settlement on the continent. The post-apocalyptic genre itself has a long and rich cultural history that the Book of Eli engages with seriously. The genre emerged in its modern form in the mid-20th century, shaped by the anxieties of the nuclear age and the very real possibility that human technological capacity had outrun human moral wisdom. Films, novels, and other cultural works imagining the aftermath of nuclear war or other catastrophic events serve a function in culture that goes beyond simple entertainment. They are a way of processing collective anxieties, of asking hard questions about the relationship between civilization and violence, and of exploring what would remain of human identity and human value if everything external were stripped away. The Book of Eli participates in this cultural conversation with more philosophical seriousness than most entries in the genre, asking not just how people would survive after the apocalypse but what they would believe, what they would fight for, and what would be worth carrying across the ruins. The significance of blindness in cultural and religious history. The revelation of Eli's blindness at the end of the film connects the character to one of the oldest and most culturally significant traditions in human storytelling, the tradition of the blind prophet or seer whose physical lack of sight is the condition of their spiritual vision. This tradition appears in cultures around the world and across thousands of years of human history, and understanding it gives the film's final revelation a resonance that extends far beyond a simple plot twist. In ancient Greek culture, the figure of Tiresias, the blind prophet of Thebes who appears in multiple major works of Greek tragedy including Sophocles' Oedipus Rex and Antigone, established the archetype most clearly in the Western tradition. Tiresias was blinded by the gods but given the gift of prophetic insight in compensation. His physical blindness was understood as the condition of his ability to see truths invisible to sighted people. The pattern recurs throughout Greek mythology and tragedy, establishing a cultural convention that blindness and spiritual vision are intimately connected. In the biblical tradition itself, the figure of the blind man receiving sight is one of the most frequently occurring miracle narratives, representing the opening of spiritual as well as physical perception. The Apostle Paul, one of the most important figures in early Christian history, was struck blind on the road to Damascus at the moment of his conversion, and his sight was restored only after he accepted his new faith. In the Hebrew Bible, the patriarch Isaac was blind in his old age and was deceived by his son Jacob, a story that explores the tension between physical and spiritual perception with considerable sophistication. In the specific context of the Book of Eli, Eli's blindness functions as the ultimate statement about the nature of the faith he embodies. He literally cannot see the world through which he moves. He navigates it entirely through his other senses, through his internalized knowledge of the book he carries, and through what the film presents as divine guidance. He is the ultimate example of walking by faith, and not by sight, a phrase that comes directly from the biblical tradition and that the film is quite deliberately invoking. The fact that he read the Bible in Braille, tracing the sacred words with his fingertips rather than his eyes, adds another dimension to this. He did not merely read about faith. He literally felt it with his hands. The Book of Eli, 2010, YouTube video outro. And that right there is everything you need to know about the Book of Eli, one of the most powerful, deeply layered, and genuinely unforgettable films of the modern era. From its stunning visual style to its extraordinary performances, from its rich cultural and historical roots to its profound spiritual message, this is a film that rewards every single minute of attention you give it. It is the kind of film that does not just entertain you. It stays with you. It makes you think. It makes you ask questions about your own life, your own faith, your own sense of purpose, and what you would be willing to carry across 30 years of hardship if you believed in it deeply enough. What Denzel Washington brought to this role is something that very few actors in the history of cinema could have delivered. The stillness, the authority, the quiet and unshakable faith of Eli is not something you can manufacture from technique alone. It comes from a place of genuine personal conviction, and Washington had it in every single frame. Gary Oldman gave us a villain of real intelligence and genuine menace, reminding us once again why he is one of the greatest actors who has ever stood in front of a camera. Mila Kunis gave Solara a journey that feels completely real and completely earned. And the Hughes brothers wrapped all of it in a visual world so distinctive and so perfectly realized that you could freeze any single frame of this film and hang it on a wall. If this video series on the Book of Eli gave you something valuable, whether that was a new understanding of the story, a deeper appreciation of the cast, a connection to the history and culture behind the film, or simply the enjoyment of spending time with a movie that genuinely deserves this level of attention, then everything about making this content was completely worth it. That is the whole reason this channel exists. To take films that matter and give them the serious, thorough, and passionate treatment they deserve. So if you have not yet watched the Book of Eli, go and watch it tonight. And if you have already seen it, watch it again with everything you now know. Watch it knowing Eli is blind from the beginning. Watch Carnegie with a full understanding of the historical tradition he represents. Watch Solara knowing where her journey ends. You will see an entirely different film, and it will be even better the second time than it was the first. Now before you go, there are just a few things this channel needs from you, and they genuinely make an enormous difference. First, hit that like button right now if you got value from this video series. It takes 1 second and it tells the algorithm that this content is worth showing to more people who love great cinema. Second, share this video with someone in your life who loves films, who loves history, who loves thoughtful storytelling, or who simply has not yet discovered the Book of Eli and needs someone to point them in the right direction. You might be about to introduce someone to one of their new favorite films, and that is a genuinely wonderful thing to do for another person. Third, and most importantly, subscribe to this channel if you have not already done so, and make sure the bell notification is turned on so that every time a new video goes up, you are among the very first people to see it. There is so much more content coming on this channel. More deep dives into films that deserve this kind of serious and passionate attention. More breakdowns of stories that changed cinema. More exploration of the history and culture embedded in the movies we love. This is only the beginning, and the best is genuinely still ahead. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching this entire series on the Book of Eli. Your time and your attention are the most valuable things you could give to this channel, and I do not take either of them for granted for a single second. This channel exists because of people exactly like you, people who want more than surface-level content, people who want to go deep, to understand fully, and to walk away from a video genuinely knowing something they did not know before. Until the next video, keep watching great films, keep asking deep questions, and never stop looking for meaning in the stories that the world tells. I will see you very soon.